Chosen one, God just signed the verdict on your behalf. Chosen one, before you read another word, pause. Because what you are about to feel is not hype. It is not emotion. It is not coincidence. It is confirmation. You have been living in a season that made no sense. Prayers felt delayed. Doors stayed shut longer than necessary. People who were wrong somehow looked like they were winning. And the silence from heaven felt heavier than the noise from your enemies. But what you did not see was paperwork. Not punishment. Not abandonment. Documentation. While you thought nothing was happening, heaven was recording everything. Every tear you wiped away in private. Every night you stared at the ceiling asking, God, how long? Every time you chose integrity when revenge would have been easier. Every moment you stayed quiet while lies were spoken loudly about you. You thought silence meant inactivity. But Scripture says in Psalm 56:8, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Recorded. That means this was never random. Chosen one, the delay was not denial. It was documentation. You were being observed in the unseen court of heaven. Not judged for destruction, but prepared for vindication. While people thought they were getting away with manipulation, betrayal, or silent sabotage, they were unknowingly building a case file. And the reason heaven stayed quiet was because the evidence was still being gathered. You wanted immediate justice. God was building irreversible justice. There is a difference. If it had happened too soon, it would have looked emotional. If it had happened too quickly, they would have called it luck. If it had happened when you demanded it, it would have seemed like coincidence. But now the timing exposes everything. You have felt the shift recently, haven't you? That strange calm. That unexplainable steadiness. That quiet confidence rising in your chest even though nothing external has fully changed yet. That is not delusion. That is divine notification. Heaven has signed something on your behalf. Isaiah 54 verse 17 has been hovering over your life like a sealed decree. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. Read that carefully. It does not say weapons won't form. It says they won't prosper. That means formation was allowed. Attack was permitted. Pressure was necessary. Because the weapon needed to be visible for the verdict to matter. If there was no accusation, there would be no public acquittal. If there was no trap, there would be no undeniable escape. If there was no silence, there would be no dramatic ruling. And here is what most people missed. The very thing meant to exhaust you has now become the evidence that justifies your elevation. You thought you were being overlooked. But you were being evaluated. You thought you were forgotten. But you were being finalized. There is a difference between being ignored and being processed. Heaven was processing your endurance. Think about Joseph. Sold by his brothers. Forgotten in prison. Misjudged. Overlooked. Years of silence. It looked like neglect. But when the moment came, one ruling changed everything. One interpretation. One shift. One signed decision from the throne that placed him second in command overnight. The prison wasn't pointless. It was preparation. And what feels like confinement in your life right now? It is containment before release. You have been asking, why hasn't God defended me yet? Because the defense required time to become undeniable. There are people who misread your silence as weakness. They misread your patience as passivity. They misread your restraint as fear. They have no idea a verdict has already been issued. And here is the part that will shake you. When heaven rules in your favor, it does not just protect you. It rearranges environments. Some relationships will shift without argument. Some opportunities will appear without effort. Some people will distance themselves without confrontation. Some truths will surface without you speaking a word. That is what happens when divine paperwork is finalized. You won't have to announce it. The fruit will reveal it. You are stepping into a season where explanation is unnecessary because evidence will speak. But here is the warning: lean in closely. The signing of the verdict does not mean comfort immediately. It means movement. And movement can feel disruptive before it feels victorious. Things may start shifting faster now. Conversations may feel different. Certain doors may close abruptly. Do not panic. When a ruling is issued, adjustments follow. And what you are about to witness will make you understand why the silence had to last as long as it did. Because the next phase is not quiet. It is undeniable. Stay here. Because what heaven signed is about to be enforced. Chosen one, the enforcement has already begun. But it does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it shows up in very ordinary ways. A phone call you didn't expect. An apology that comes out of nowhere. A delay that suddenly makes sense. A door that closes before it can waste another year of your life. You were waiting for something dramatic. But heaven often moves through the practical details of your daily struggle. You prayed for justice. God started adjusting people's motives. You prayed for breakthrough. God started rearranging your schedule. You prayed for clarity. God began exposing hidden intentions quietly. You've been dealing with real-life problems. Bills stacking up while your income stayed the same. Watching less qualified people get promoted. Family misunderstandings that made you question your own worth. Being the strong one for everyone else while secretly feeling exhausted. Let's talk about that exhaustion. There were mornings you woke up already tired. Not physically, spiritually. You kept showing up to work even when your heart felt bruised. You kept smiling at relatives who misunderstood you. You kept serving in places that barely acknowledged your contribution. And you wondered, God, are you even seeing this? Look at Galatians 6 verse 9. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap, if we do not give up. Due season. Not random season. Not accidental season. Due season. That means there was a timetable attached to your obedience. When your manager overlooked you again, it wasn't the end. When your friend distanced themselves without explanation, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. When that relationship fell apart after you invested years, it wasn't humiliation, it was preservation. Heaven does not rush rulings. It releases them when they cannot be reversed. You thought you were losing time. But you were being spared future regret. Remember that job you didn't get? At the time, it hurt. You felt embarrassed telling people they chose someone else. But months later you realized that company downsized. That environment turned toxic. That role would have drained you. That was enforcement. Remember when someone lied about you and you didn't defend yourself? You cried in private, replaying conversations, wishing you had spoken louder. But slowly, the truth began to surface. People started seeing inconsistencies without you exposing anything. That was enforcement. The verdict on your behalf is not always loud, but it is precise. Some of you have been struggling financially. You tithed when it didn't make sense. You gave when you barely had enough. You trusted when logic told you to panic. And you felt foolish sometimes. But heaven tracks faithfulness in famine. Psalm 37 verse 25 says, I have been young, and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. That does not mean there are no tight seasons. It means abandonment is never the final outcome. You may have felt stretched, but you were never forsaken. And now, subtle provision is starting to appear. Small increases, unexpected support, creative ideas, new connections. It may not look like overflow yet, but it is movement. And movement means the verdict is active. Here is what you must understand. When heaven signs in your favor, it does not always remove the battlefield instantly. Sometimes it strengthens you inside it until your presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Have you noticed you react differently now? Things that used to trigger you don't hit the same. The opinions that once crushed you don't carry the same weight. The fear that used to keep you up at night has softened. That is not numbness. That is maturity forged under pressure. You are not the same person who entered this season. The silence built muscle in your spirit. The waiting sharpened your discernment. The betrayal refined your boundaries. And here is something deeply practical. Some of the delay was protecting you from stepping into success with the wrong mindset. If elevation had come when you were still desperate for validation, you would have tolerated manipulation. If influence had come while you still feared losing people, you would have compromised truth. If abundance had come before discipline, it would have disappeared as quickly as it arrived. The verdict required you to be ready to carry it. That is why heaven waited. But now something is shifting in your environment. Watch carefully. Certain people will begin to treat you differently without knowing why. Opportunities will begin circling you. Conversations about you will start sounding different behind closed doors. You won't need to chase what is already assigned. However, and listen closely, the enemy will attempt one final distraction. Not a big attack. A subtle one. Doubt. A whisper that says, nothing has really changed. A thought that says, you're imagining the shift. A memory of past disappointments trying to convince you this will be another one. Do not partner with that voice. Because the same God who allowed the documentation is now enforcing the decision. And what is about to unfold will make the long nights, the silent tears, and the quiet endurance make undeniable sense. But there is one more layer to this verdict that you have not fully understood yet. And once you see it, you will realize this was never only about you. Chosen one, this was never only about you. That may sound surprising after everything you've endured. The sleepless nights. The private prayers. The quiet battles no one else understood. It felt personal because it was happening to you. But the ruling heaven signed carries consequences that stretch beyond your own relief. Your endurance created a ripple. Think about your family. The way you chose not to repeat toxic patterns. The way you swallowed harsh words instead of escalating arguments. The way you decided to heal instead of becoming bitter. That wasn't weakness. That was generational interruption. Somebody had to break the cycle. When you refused to respond with revenge, you shifted something in your bloodline. When you chose integrity in business even when cutting corners would have been easier, you protected your future children from consequences they would never even know existed. You thought you were just surviving. You were establishing precedent. Deuteronomy 28 talks about blessings overtaking you when you walk faithfully. But people forget that obedience doesn't just impact the present, it sets legal ground for the future. Your quiet obedience gave heaven permission to move in ways you couldn't see. Let's make this practical. When you kept showing up to work with excellence even though your boss barely acknowledged you, you were building reputation equity. Now when opportunity opens, and it will, there will already be witnesses to your consistency. When you stayed faithful in a relationship that required patience and communication instead of pride, you developed emotional strength. Now you won't sabotage stable love when it arrives. When you managed your limited finances responsibly instead of recklessly, even while praying for increase, you proved you could handle more. That's how rulings work. They don't ignore character. They confirm it. James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised." Having stood the test. That implies examination. The silence you resented was part of the examination. The waiting room was part of the evaluation. And you passed tests you didn't even know were being graded. Now here is what shifts in this season. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you will begin asking, "What is this positioning me for?" That mindset change is critical. Because the enforcement phase can look confusing before it looks victorious. Sometimes promotions require relocation. Sometimes answered prayers require uncomfortable transitions. Sometimes blessings arrive disguised as necessary endings. You may lose access to certain circles. Not because you failed, but because you outgrew them. You may notice distance forming between you and people who once felt close. Not because you are arrogant, but because your direction changed. Growth naturally creates separation. Jesus experienced that too. In John 6, when his teachings became difficult to accept, many disciples walked away. He didn't chase them to make the message softer. He let them go because the mission required alignment, not approval. That applies to you more than you realize. Not everyone can walk into your next season. And that's okay. You've spent too much time trying to make everyone comfortable with your calling. The verdict heaven signed was not based on public opinion. It was based on purpose. This is also why some prayers seemed unanswered. You asked for certain relationships to stay. You asked for certain doors to remain open. But heaven saw where those paths would eventually lead. Closed doors were not rejection. They were redirection with mercy. You're going to look back 6 months from now and realize that what felt like loss was actually protection. Conversations that ended abruptly prevented deeper betrayal. Opportunities that slipped away spared you from long-term frustration. Clarity is coming. But clarity often follows obedience, not comfort. In practical terms, here's what this means for you now. Be consistent. Even when recognition is slow. Be disciplined. Even when increase is gradual. Be kind. Even when others are insecure. Be faithful. Even when applause is absent. Because enforcement is not magic, it is manifestation of what was already decided. And here's something steady and simple, you don't need to force anything anymore. If something is meant for you in this next chapter, it will not require manipulation. It will not demand you shrink yourself. It will not ask you to compromise your peace. Peace will be the confirmation. Colossians 3 verse 15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." Notice that word. Rule. Peace is part of the verdict. If anxiety dominates, pause. If confusion overwhelms, wait. The ruling from heaven carries clarity and steadiness, even if circumstances are still shifting. You are not entering chaos. You are entering alignment. And alignment may feel unfamiliar at first because you've grown used to fighting for every inch. But this next stretch will feel different. Less striving. More flow. Less convincing. More confirmation. However, there is still one critical instruction you must understand before everything fully unfolds. Because how you respond in the next few weeks will determine how quickly the signed verdict becomes visible reality. And this instruction may challenge you more than the waiting ever did. Chosen one, if you are still here reading this, if you have stayed through every word instead of scrolling away, that tells me something about you. You are not here for entertainment. You are here because something in your spirit whispered, "This is for you." Be honest. You didn't stay this long because life has been easy. You stayed because you have been carrying questions no one around you could answer. You stayed because you've been strong for everyone else, but you needed someone to speak strength back into you. So here it is, clearly, directly, without exaggeration. You were not crazy for believing more was coming. You were not foolish for holding on. You were not weak for crying in private. The reason this message resonates is because it confirms what you've sensed but couldn't articulate. There has been a shift. Subtle, but real. You felt it when you wake up. You felt it when certain things no longer trigger you the same way. You felt it when old fears don't grip your chest as tightly as before. You didn't imagine that. You've crossed something spiritually. And the reason you've watched this far is because deep down, you needed reassurance that the waiting meant something. It did. But here is what you truly need, not hype, not drama, not vague promises. You need direction. So let's make this practical. In this next season, protect your focus. Distraction will be the enemy's last attempt. Not destruction, distraction. Small arguments. Petty misunderstandings. Sudden emotional triggers. Old habits trying to resurface. The urge to prove yourself to people who already decided how they see you. Do not engage. The verdict has already been signed. You do not argue after a case is closed. Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Guard it now more than ever. Some of you are about to receive opportunities you prayed for a year ago. But if you're still emotionally entangled in yesterday's pain, you won't recognize them. Some of you are about to experience restoration in areas you thought were permanently broken. But if you're still rehearsing old disappointment, you'll sabotage what's rebuilding. That's why you're still watching. Because part of you knows this isn't just about external change. It's about internal readiness. You asked for elevation, but elevation requires emotional stability. You asked for influence, but influence requires humility. You asked for abundance, but abundance requires discipline. And the silence you endured? It built those muscles. Let me speak directly to something specific. There are viewers right now who feel behind in life. You scroll through social media and see engagements, promotions, new houses, travel photos, and you quietly compare. You wonder if you missed your moment. You didn't. Comparison is a distorted timeline. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." It's time. Not their time. Not social media's time. Not society's pressure clock. Your time. And here's the gift for those who stayed until this point. Your delay preserved your authenticity. If things had happened faster, you might have built something impressive but unstable. You might have gained attention but lost peace. You might have attracted applause but attracted the wrong people with it. Instead, you were refined slowly. And refinement doesn't trend, but it lasts. That's what you're stepping into now. Not a loud breakthrough, but a lasting one. You won't have to announce it. People will sense it. Your conversations will carry weight. Your decisions will carry confidence. Your presence will carry calm authority. Not arrogance, assurance. And here's something else you need to hear. You don't need everyone to understand your journey. Some people only saw the surface version of you. They didn't see the discipline. They didn't see the prayer. They didn't see the internal battles you fought just to stay kind. But heaven saw it. And because heaven saw it, reward is not dependent on recognition. If this message has felt personal, it's because it is aligning with something already happening behind the scenes in your life. Doors are shifting. Conversations are being prepared. Alignments are forming quietly. But there is still one final truth you must understand, one final adjustment that will determine whether you walk into this next chapter boldly or hesitantly. Because the verdict has been signed. The enforcement has begun. The environment is shifting. Now the only remaining question is this. Will you step into what's been released for you, or will you shrink back into what feels familiar? What you choose next will define everything. Chosen one, now we return to the weight of it. The verdict was not motivational language. It was not poetic encouragement. It was a legal shift in the unseen. And if you have stayed until this final moment, it is because something inside you knows this is not random content. It feels personal. It feels timed. It feels like confirmation meeting readiness. So let this ending carry the same fire the beginning held. The verdict has been signed on your behalf. But here is the first truth you must embrace if you are going to walk in it. Stop standing like a defendant. Some of you are spiritually cleared but psychologically still on trial. You over-explain yourself. You overthink your words. You anticipate rejection before it happens. You brace for disappointment even in moments of peace. That posture does not match the ruling. When heaven signs in your favor, you do not walk timidly, you walk steadily. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." Notice the tone. Not panic. Not pressure. Assurance. You do not need to prove your worth anymore. You do not need to convince people who misjudged you. The case is closed. Let your calm be louder than your defense. And here is the second truth. Move like alignment has already begun. Because it has. Stop waiting for everything to look different before you act different. If the verdict released increase, start preparing space. If the verdict released clarity, stop entertaining confusion. If the verdict released elevation, stop shrinking to stay comfortable. This is not about hype. It is about participation. When Peter stepped out of the boat in Matthew 14, the water did not turn into stone. It remained water. But alignment allowed him to walk on what should have swallowed him. Your circumstances may not instantly transform, but your posture must. Wake up with intention. Handle your responsibilities with excellence. Speak with restraint instead of reaction. Make decisions from peace, not panic. Because when heaven authorizes you, your discipline sustains you. And now the third truth, the one most people miss. Guard the atmosphere around you. After a verdict is signed, there is always noise. Opinions. Doubts. Subtle provocations. The enemy rarely attacks head-on after losing ground, he whispers. You sure this is real? What if nothing changes? Remember last time? Do not entertain that voice. Philippians 4 verse 8 instructs you to think on what is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable. That is not suggestion. That is strategy. Protect your focus. Not everyone deserves access to your next chapter. Not every conversation deserves your emotional energy. Some distances forming in your life are not losses, they are filters. You are being separated from what cannot go where you are going. And here is what you stayed for, the reassurance beneath the intensity. You did not imagine the shift. The heaviness you carried for months is lifting. The confusion that clouded you is clearing. The desperation that once drove you is settling into quiet confidence. You are not the same person who entered this season. The silence matured you. The delay strengthened you. The betrayal clarified you. And now enforcement is unfolding in ways that will look natural to outsiders. But you will know they were supernatural. A conversation that opens a door. A connection that changes direction. A sudden opportunity that feels right. An unexpected peace about a hard decision. That is how signed verdicts manifest, not always with spectacle, but with precision. So step into this next stretch without fear. You are not chasing approval anymore. You are not begging for access anymore. You are not fighting to be seen anymore. You are walking in what has already been decided. And if this message resonated deeply, if something in your spirit felt awakened, strengthened, steadied, hold on to that. Stay connected to what feeds your faith. Remain in environments that sharpen your clarity. Continue leaning into truth. Because this is not the end of your shift. It is the beginning of visibility. The ruling has been written. The signature is sealed. The delay is explained. Now your life will begin to reflect what heaven already declared. And when the evidence starts appearing in your reality, when doors open without force, when peace steadies your steps, when favor finds you without striving, you will remember this moment. You will realize the silence was never empty. It was preparation for this. And what unfolds next will make it undeniable.